everybody. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties here. How's everybody today? I'm cold. I've been cold for 2 days. I think I'm going to be cold until end of April. That's my news. So I have always a cup of hot tea. So next week we're going to announce some major news. So I hope you log in next Thursday. I think everybody's going to be very, very excited. That's one. Number two, if anybody here is following us, we are looking for immigration paralegals, 2 of them to hire. They must speak English and have at least 5 years of work experience. So everybody knows anybody. You can send us resumes. You can even send it here. You have to have the required experience. You must have worked as an immigration paralegal for at least 5 years, and you must speak, read, and write Spanish. So that's that. Let's get to the news. So we have new enforcement priorities that were announced by the Secretary of the USCIS. What are enforcement priorities? It is basically who, when, and how ICE can detain, arrest, and detain, right? So we all know that under the previous administration, there were these highly publicized, announced, sometimes unannounced raids on undocumented immigrants and people with active deportation orders. And the president would tweet about it, and it's going to be on the news and stuff like that. And they would capture 100, 150 people at the same time, and then we would never hear about it, because obviously then everybody has their own case, and just because somebody's arrested doesn't mean they're getting deported from the United States. But that was all left to the imagination. Now, you must have noticed that in the last, what has it been now, 9 months, we haven't really heard anything. Does that mean that the government is not deporting anybody? No, it doesn't mean that. Absolutely not. The government always deports people. In fact, for example, the Obama administration has deported the most amount of people out of the United States. It's just the way that they deported, arrested people, they had a very guided approach, because they had a certain amount of money that was available, and they would concentrate on people who they think, or is, common understanding, will cause the most damage to our society. So that brings me to the recent developments. As I've already told you, the enforcement priorities have changed earlier in the year, and now they have been expanded even further. So they have now announced a number of places where enforcement is not going to take place, meaning people will not be arrested in those places. Schools, daycares, preschools, any learning programs, secondary schools, colleges, universities, education-related activities. So that means ICE is not going to go into those places to arrest or detain individuals. Medical treatment and healthcare facilities, right? Including COVID-19 vaccination. So if you're in one of those, you can feel safe that you won't be arrested there. Third, places of worship, churches, synagogue, mosques, and temples, right? Anywhere where you worship your God, you will be safe. Places where children gather, playgrounds, recreational center, child care centers, school activities, foster care facilities, group homes, school buses, right? So your kids and their drivers are safe. Social services establishment, and this is a huge one. We have seen that sometimes people who are victims of violence, especially in the last 5 years, were afraid to come out because they were undocumented or had active deportation orders. That is gone. because if you're in a domestic shelter, if you in victim services, crisis center, supervised visitation center, family justice center, community-based organizations, facilities for disabled people, homeless shelters, drug and alcohol counseling treatment centers, food banks, you will not be arrested for immigration related arrest. This has nothing to do with any state or other warrants that are out there. We're talking about exclusively immigration. Religious and civil ceremonies, funerals and weddings, you can be safe. There's not going to be any immigration related soprano type arrests there. Public demonstrations such as parades, demonstrations, or rallies. So this is very, very, very important. Additionally, if somebody is getting arrested, they're saying that they're going to be targeted. That means they're looking for a specific person, and they have paperwork to show that that person has essentially what is a warrant for their arrest. Okay. So these are very, very good news. In addition to that, it bears to say I had a conversation with somebody earlier, and they asked me about for people going into USCIS for interviews with an active deportation orders. Now, of course, it's a case-by-case basis. It always is. But in the last 9 months, we have not had any detentions or arrests of anybody who had a deportation order who went in for an interview, such as an I-130 family interview or even an adjustment interviews in certain cases. Every case is different. There are cases when I would say that it is appropriate to prepare a stay of removal before we go in. There are cases where it is appropriate just to go in. Not everybody needs the same type of approach, and we will work with you to prepare your case in the best way that is applicable to your situation. That is enforcement priorities. Good news. What are my good news? I've touched on this before, but on November 8th, we are officially open for business. That means the country, not us personally. On October 25th, our president has announced that he's going to be lifting restrictions on travel to the U.S. for vaccinated individuals. Let me explain to you what that means. You can travel to the U.S. if you're unvaccinated, if you follow other COVID protocols such as pre-testing to the flight, masks on a flight, post-testing after arrival, if you're a U.S. citizen, green card holder, or somebody who is traveling here with an immigrant visa. Means you went to an interview at a U.S. embassy, got your immigrant visa. When you come to the U.S., you will receive your green card, but you don't have it in your hands. You're still an immigrant to the United States. You can travel to the U.S. If you followed all other COVID protocols, but you're unvaccinated, you can still travel. For everybody else, the restrictions are lifted for the following countries: Brazil, China, India, Iran, Ireland, Schengen area, which is a smaller area within the EU, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. That means people who are now in those countries will become eligible to receive non-immigrant visas and will be eligible to travel directly from these countries to the EU, right? So if you are a UK citizen who wants to come on a holiday to the US and you're fully vaccinated, you have to follow all the other protocols, but you can now, not now, starting November 8th, you can now come to the US. Now, what's important is that you need to understand that just because you're now eligible to receive a non-immigrant visa at a U.S. embassy in one of these countries, right, where restrictions have been lifted, that doesn't mean that the U.S. embassy is going to start scheduling cases right away. We have seen a lot of movement in a lot of countries, slowly progressing to restoring visa processing, and different countries fluctuate a little bit. There were countries that were open, then closed when COVID spiked and stuff like that. But we are seeing a very slow return to normal. There was actually good news yesterday. There was a case we've been working on since, I'm gonna say, May, right? Emails, phone calls, phone calls. Finally, the interview has been scheduled, and we are now in the final stages of prepping the person to come to the US. We're always very, very excited when that happens. So we have just touched on the travel to the US. Now, please remember that even if you're vaccinated, one thing to remember is that you have to see which vaccines are acceptable for international travel. Apparently there are a multitude of vaccines, but not all of them have been sanctioned as valid. Two, there are guidelines as to how long after you've been fully vaccinated you can start traveling. It's 2 weeks after your last dose. So if you got a last shot yesterday, or you got a single shot yesterday, you can get on board on one of these planes for 2 weeks. And third, if you're vaccinated, does not eliminate other COVID protocols. They still require you to wear a mask on the plane. I could tell you for sure, just was on the plane, and the stewardess will come to you. I'll say, please put it over your nose, even if you're 5 years old, right? So they are on top of it. I did notice that a lot of I said stewardess. I didn't mean to offend anybody. I have flight attendant clients. I'm sorry. Slipped out. Flight attendants are very frustrated because I think people are frustrated and people don't always communicate their frustrations in the best ways. So then flight attendants are frustrated and it becomes this vicious circle because they're frustrated makes you frustrated. So I think an extra smile during COVID travel never hurt anybody. So that's that. Immigration reform update. So, of course, when Joe Biden took office, I was the most optimistic person because we had the Congress and we had both chambers of the Congress and we had the president. I thought, here we go. Well, we have not gone anywhere. That is not to say that what could be done is being done without the involvement of Congress. The elimination on enforcement, the ability to file joint motions to reopen, certain other applications have definitely helped a good percentage of our clients restart their cases or move forward with their cases, right? But it's not to the extent that we thought that it was going to happen. However, immigration reform is not dead. Democrats are trying now limited paths to at least have some things happen, right? So this whole reconciliation thing they're talking about, which would allow them to pass certain immigration things without requiring a supermajority, so to speak, but just with a majority, which, we have, they have definitely been narrow, right? So what they're trying to do, one of the talks was kind of a national registry that would allow certain undocumented immigrants to seek legalization in United States if they have been present in the United States prior to a certain day and other requirements are met. So we've had that type of situation happen twice already under Reagan, and the second one in the year 2000 under Clinton. So that is not a new approach. That's something that has been done before. And it's interesting, but to this day, 21 years later, we still, although not often, but we still get cases where people are able to legalize because of the law that was passed in the late 90s and was enforced up until April 30th, basically 2000, right? So that would definitely capture a huge amount of people. They are trying to pass a path to green card, to legalization for DACA and TPS. TPS is temporary protective status for individuals who are present in the US from certain countries most of the time when there's internal conflict. And DACA, of course, are our dreamer kids, which to me is bizarre because overwhelming, I think it's above 75%, I think it's like 78 or something. Over 75% of the American people say that people who came here as kids should be able to stay here. And I can tell you from experience that I have spoken to people who, up until they were grown up enough, did not even know that they were American. For all intents and purposes, they speak like we do, they act like we do, they eat like we do, they live like we do, and some of them never even knew that that is their situation. That's heartbreaking. So I truly hope that they do not give up on that. And I understand now that it may be impossible to help the millions of people that they thought that they could, but I hope, just because they're not getting the full extent of the immigration reform, that they won't give up and at least try to help the people who they can, the people that they can. Lastly, today I'm going to start telling you a little bit about O-1 visas. These are non-immigrant visas for people with extraordinary abilities in science, in business, in arts, in athletics, and in, yes, business, science, arts, education, business, and athletics, right? This is a non-immigrant visa, meaning you're coming here for a limited amount of time, but this visa often then becomes the basis, some sort, to apply for a more permanent stay here in the US. But not everybody who gets an O-1 wants to stay here permanently. Some people are coming in for projects and so on and so forth. The visa is reserved for people with extraordinary abilities, right? And you will say, well, what is extraordinary? Actually, USCIS have a pretty defined view of what it means. They want us to pick 3 out of 7 categories and demonstrate that people have achieved the level of expertise or the level of acknowledgement in their own area that is that only a very select group of people has previously achieved, right? Mere education is not enough. If you have 3 degrees but you work as a regular programmer or engineer or something like that, that's not going to be enough to show, to demonstrate extraordinary ability, right? But oftentimes we bring artists on O-1, people who have had exhibitions, who've been featured in news articles, magazine articles, online. We bring chefs, right, who have some sort of international or national acclaim, and that goes towards everybody. We bring people who are professors, for example, who have written work that has been then the basis or has revealed some sort of a new discovery and then has been cited and recited and was academically acclaimed. We bring business people who have constructed concepts in business that were previously undeveloped or unknown to everybody, and therefore their work is used or well known within the industry, right? That is a part of it, and I'll dive into more specific details later. Second part of it is that as an O-1, you're coming to continue the work that you have been doing before. So O-1 doesn't mean that you've achieved something in the past and now you're coming to just hang out in the United States. O-1 means that you were working in the area of science, of arts, of education, of business, and then you're coming here to continue working for an employer in the same area where you've worked before. That means in O-1 there's a petitioner who is the employer, right? And there's the beneficiary who is you. So you have to have some sort of employment offer, because there are strict requirements and we have to explain what it is you're coming here to do, where you're going to be working, what are you going to be doing. So then one of the big parts of the O-1, of course, is that we have to get a peer review. That means, for example, there's the Actors Guild, right? You could go and you ask for peer review for your craft, and we get these statements that say, yes, we recognize this is an extraordinary achievement, yes, we concur with the assessment, and that actually gets filed with USCIS. There's an exception to that. If you're in a type of area where there's no advisory group or peer review group from whom we can get an opinion, then of course we have to demonstrate that one does not exist, and then we can ask to be excused from that requirement. But that also requires labor organization. So for example, if your field is unionized in some places and there's a labor organization that oversees a part of your field, we could go to the labor organization, submit to them your submit to them the description of your achievements and things that you've done in the past, and they will basically come out with an advisory opinion telling whether they agree with the classification of you as a person of extraordinary ability. So that is just a little bit of how we assess it. When a person comes to us, we talk to them, of course, and then we ask for a very detailed resume. We ask for educational background, which a lot of the times gets submitted in order to be so to speak translated into the standards of the American education, because in other countries sometimes 4 years of education equals a bachelor's here, and 5 years of education equals a bachelor's and a master's here. So there are these evaluations that are done. We ask for a number of things about your life, depending on in which field you are going to be seeking the O-1, and when we determine that you are in fact eligible, we start the work. Now, there are two different possibilities, of course. If you're already in the United States, we can do what's called a change of status. And if you're outside of the United States, then the process is broken down essentially into two parts. One is when we prepare and submit an application here in the United States and it gets approved. Then if you're outside of the United States, you have to we will schedule it for you, an appointment at a U.S. embassy in order to get an actual stamp in your passport to be able to travel on your O-1 to the United States. Okay? So this is just the introduction to the O-1. I'm going to dive into more specific requirements next week. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, some of the cases that we've handled in the past that were very interesting and exciting. If you have any questions, please send them to me. If there's any topic that's interesting to you, I can certainly discuss that in more detail. If you have any questions, you know where to find us. We're everywhere. We're on Google, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. Where are we not? We're everywhere. Our information is readily available online, and we welcome all inquiries. And I hope to see all of you next week on Thursday at 10 a.m. And I hope that everybody stays warm and has a great Halloween. And Halloween is going to kick off the end of the year and the holiday season, so I hope everybody's ready for that. And I was happy to see everybody here and everybody who's going to visit us on the YouTube channel. Don't forget about our YouTube channel. You can go there and you can watch everything that we've ever done on every single topic, and hopefully get some information that interests you or is useful to you. Thank you very much, and I hope everybody has a great end of the week.